with them? Okay. So we got at least those two individuals that we know about. Do we know anything about the situation at Thessalonica when Paul got there? Because I think that has a play with these two books that we're studying on that. Anybody remember out of Acts chapter 17 on his second preaching trip, what happened? Of course, his customary was to go into the synagogues, right? And to reason with them, talk with them, and things of that nature. What else happened there? Well, basically got run out of town. Some people didn't like it, okay? Some people didn't like it. So the brethren there took him, went down to Berea, and of course we have the contrast of the Bereans and the Thessalonians. What would the Bereans do then when Paul got there? One of the scriptures that we use hopefully often. They were more noble. Okay, they searched the scriptures. Okay, they looked and see what Paul was teaching them and things of that nature. The people of Thessalonica just wasn't. They didn't run Paul out of Thessalonica. Okay, there's a little group that follows him around and stirs up trouble in the next few towns that he goes to. So just be aware of that. We come into chapter 2. What was an overview of the first book, 1 Thessalonica? He was dealing with one particular subject there in chapter 4 and 5 that kind of rolls over into this book. And what would that have been? What was their thinking at that time? Some of them wasn't working because of when they're
coming back.
Yeah, the thought process that Jesus was coming back and probably soon. So why work and everything? So Paul had to correct that. And in chapter 2, we're going to begin in verse 1 through 5, and we're going to pick on Ellen and Jean and Betty. 5 verses. Ellen, if you want to take 2, Jean take 3, or however y'all want to divide it up.
Now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, that you may not quickly shaken from your composure or be disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter, as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come.
Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition.
Okay, 4 and 5. I'm sorry.
Okay. Who opposes and exalteth himself above all that is called God, and that is worship, so that he, as God, is sitting in the temple of God, showing himself that he is of God. Remember you not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things.
All right, last week we dwelt with verses 1 and 2 and got into 3. What does verse 2 tell us that Paul was asking them to do or not to do at this point? Didn't he say not to be quickly shaken? Okay, y'all have received the word. We look at that in verse 5. Do you remember that while I was still with you? So he's telling them not to be shaken in their composure. Don't let folks disturb them. Keep, what's another way of saying it? Keep steadfast, okay, immovable. So he kind of sets it up, say, okay, don't be shaken. And then in verse 3 it says, let no one in any way deceive you. Now that's a pretty interesting phrase right there, if you kind of dissect it. I've looked up various versions and everything, and they're pretty much, I used the New American Standard, stayed with that phraseology. The Greek interlinear book says it like this, interpreted as like this: not lest some you to subdue wholly down, not even one. That's, the Greeks are kind of leaving out words and stuff, but the thought is not everyone subdue you wholly. Okay, so deception there, they interpret as subdue holy. So don't let people come in and, tell you things and get you where you're wavering in your faith and take you away into another doctrine or anything like that, like the Galatian church or the churches of Galatia, chapter 1. Marvel that you've quickly, gone away from the truth, have another doctrine, and things of that nature. So we get anyway, meaning let no one, deceive you. Now, is that a difficult thing to do? Being deceived, let me rephrase it, being deceived, is that a difficulty? Yes, Warren.
I think we're all susceptible to that to some degree. We have to be able to make that decision. That's what this passage is about, is to, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Probably is.
So that's kind of like the old expression, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So this is something that I think is kind of like our human trait, that we get ourselves in a position sometimes and if we hear something and you think, boy, that really sounds pretty good. Sounds like that's really the deal. But if you examine it against the truth and what you already know and been told, and you can recognize, it helps you work through that. And that's, I think, some of the basis for what he's trying to bring them into remembrance.
Right, okay. We are not to be deceived, but yet can we not deceive others? I mean, isn't that like a two-way swing there? So we're not to be deceived, but yet we don't need to be deceiving others either. And we could do that, can we not? Yes, EJ. Excuse me.
On the other hand, it sounds like he's talking about weak-minded and strong-minded. The strong-minded, about like it is in the Bible, the strong mind built his house on rock and the other one built it on sand. Sounds like the weak mind, somebody can serve, sweets, and they fall for it because they don't really understand. Because they take one word and they fly with it. But the strong-minded knows, can sense the difference, ain't going nowhere.
Yep, that's good. Also, we can go to the parable of the soils. We got the pathway, the hard ground, we got the thorny ground, stony ground, and good ground. That thorny ground and stony ground can play into this as well. Excuse me. So my question is, can anyone be deceived? The answer is, I've got a lot of absolutely. Absolutely. And then my next question would be, how can one be deceived? Now, we've got to put our thoughts together on this one. We explained that it is hard. It's a hard task, not to be deceived. God's Word's given us what we need to combat that. But I want to look at how are ways that we can be deceived. And if you have scriptures, bring it up. If not, we'll discuss it anyway. Mallory. Excuse me.
We kind of touched on it before, but it's really easy to convince Lucinda of other things that aren't true. So if we have that young, innocent mind, yes, we're supposed to trust people. She trusts us to not lead her astray. But you can go around with her and she'll believe in almost anything. So if we're not growing and we're not challenging what we're hearing, and we're like a 3-year-old, we're going to be very easily deceived by just anything someone is going to say.
Yeah, that's throughout the Bible, or New Testament times. Didn't it say to grow, not to stand still, but to grow? Okay. A situation happened within my family, and we got word of something, or I did, and I thought, face value, yeah, I want to, yep, okay, that's probably true. But, as we just said, in reality, researching it back, I found out other things that happened that wasn't told. So, it was like, okay, this person got this one at school, okay, I've only got one in school. But it was, and we looked at it, got the email, and it's like, what in the world's going on? So we go ask Zach, hey, what's going on? Here's what we got. And then he explained it to us. And it was something minor. It was something minor, but yet they had to report it because somebody went to the office and told them. But yet, when I got that email, it's like, this isn't happening again. Anyway, Gene.
I've got to appreciate that period of time and really appreciate where we are today. In that today, if someone comes and talks to us and tries to deceive us, maybe somebody tries to deceive us in different ways, we have the Word of God, the gospel that we can look at. And it'd be a lot easier to shun that. The letters here was written approximately 20 years, they say, after Jesus' crucifixion. And back then, as you know, the letters were written to one church and passed on to another church and whatnot. So they depended a lot upon that kind of situation at that time. And it's been very easily to be deceived.
Right. And the travel of those scrolls, I mean, they didn't get in the car and take off. They either walked or rode a donkey, camel, or whatever to get there. So, yeah. In Romans 16, verse 17 and 18, I'll start out there. We can be deceived by smooth and flattery words. All right, Romans 16. Have you ever heard of folks come and have that smooth talking and those flattery, fluffed up words, and to try to convince you of a particular something, and then once you see through it and start, as we said, looking at other things, investigating, it's not quite what they, because they smooth it out and use those words to try to soften the blow or to try to get us to lean toward, something that we like to hear. It's like, okay. But yet, as we said, if we just take it at face value as truth and go on, then is not a deception. But we find over in 1 Thessalonians 2, 5 through 7, Paul didn't come with flattery words. We can look at his letters, and there's times where he was pretty blunt. He just laid down the law and said, hey, this is it. And then there's other times where he backed off and did use some more gentler words in order to get, the thought across. But, he didn't come in flattery words. So that's one way that we can be deceptive, just our speech. Individuals have speech, things that we want to hear, or it could be the same with us. We may want to soften the blow to somebody else and use those same smooth words, flattery speech. Yes, Daniel.
Just to build off of that, Mark, we see pretty consistently anytime there's a discussion about these smooth words and deception and all that, most of these verses also include some kind of instruction to stick to what's already been delivered to you. And we saw that in Romans 16, we see it in Revelation 2, we see it in our passage today, 2 Thessalonians 2. And that's something also to keep in mind here, is that we shouldn't be going around expecting to hear, these new and exciting and revelatory kind of things. Even here in this first century, the apostles were very consistent in saying, you guys should have some pretty good idea of what's going on at this point. You have heard the important things. You should know roughly what's coming and what to do. So if we're hearing something that is just, new, totally different than what we have had before, that should be a red flag.
Right. Until further investigation.
Right.
Until further investigation. Yeah, in verse 17 there of Romans 16, I know it talks about dissension, hindrances, contrary to teaching, which you've learned, turn away from them. Keep an eye on that person until it is verified what they say. Because they would, in verse 18, use those smooth words and deception in order to, draw folks away from the truth, correct? That's what that little group in Thessalonica that went and followed Paul around, they stirred up trouble for him in the towns and cities that he went to after Thessalonica. What else, or how else can we be deceived? I've got about 8 or 9 things.
By desire.
By what?
Desire.
Desire, okay.
He was deceived that way.
Okay, I forgot that as an example. Come on, you can develop
Well, you
it.
know, she looked at the fruit and it looked good to her, and she was deceived into thinking that it was okay to have it, even though she had been told it wasn't.
Yeah, and that deception was by the serpent, which we know as Satan. And if you go back, he just changed a little bit of the wording, didn't he? Just enough that Eve's like, okay, I can.
He just added one word.
Yep. And here they are. They had a command from God, of all people. Yes, Daniel.
To add on to that, there's something to be said in that account out of Genesis. Trey had mentioned that key phrase that Eve, she knew what God had said, she heard what Satan said, and so she took a second look, and it looked good to her. So right there, that's the key, right? She changed the way she was evaluating the fruit. If she had stuck with just what God had said about it, it wasn't conditional, right? It didn't matter. God didn't say, don't eat the fruit if it looks bad. He said, don't eat the fruit. But, Eve goes in, takes a second look, uses a different set of criteria to evaluate the situation, makes the wrong choice. Very easily, we can do the same thing as well today, right? We can know what we have been taught. We can be dissatisfied with it, or someone presents something different to us, and we think, well, that sounds reasonable, or I like the outcome of that. Not going back against the original standard to which we have been working on up to that point, and we come to a different decision.
And isn't that not what the denominations are out there? I mean, didn't they stray from the truth? Somewhere in time, they strayed from the gospel, from the truth. Yes, Gene.
That's what I was thinking. Saying that, and looking at the first century and looking at the 21st century, I don't see how much more confusing they could be than we are today. I mean, we are. You're talking about confusion today. I mean,
You can get out there and you have all types of stuff. I mean, Google something on the internet and you'll find weird stuff, what I call weird stuff out.
If you notice in the last, say, 30 years, prior to that, if you saw a new group going up, they would have the Baptist says, the Methodist says, those leading denominations. Today, they don't want you to know what is being taught there. In other words, they'll say the community, something where people are, they don't know what's being taught. And of course, if they go and visit or attend, and they don't have any Bible knowledge of the Word, then they're going to just take that.
Thrown in there. Yeah, the community churches, it's just a conglomerate of everything. So if you ask one person that came out of one denomination, you'll probably get that answer from that denomination. You ask somebody else, so they're not consistent even within themselves. But that's just a conglomerate. The Christian or the community churches are. Anything else as far as deception? I got a few more I can throw out.
In Acts 2:47.
Okay, Acts 2:47. All right, go ahead.
If you have an opportunity to talk to someone today, and you just say, let's read that, and how do we get to the church? It says that God puts in the church, then you ask the question, well, what church? And somebody will say, well, I don't know. Which one? It doesn't matter. So then you can say, well, it does too, because then, in order to know which church is added to, then you have to know the Word.
Right. And people don't want to get down into the Word like it was 30, 40, 50 years ago when a lot of stuff was going on back in what, the 40s, 50s, more 60s, in that area. Y'all lived through it. Warren lived through it, so yeah, things were just coming up, and today you don't hear about things like that as it was back then. I mean, you hear a few debates here and there, but nothing like, hey, let's get together, you know, let's study that, you know, particular topic or what have you. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Another way of being deceived. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Okay, and let's see here, verse number 18. Let no man deceive you. If any man among you thinks that he is wise in this age, he must become foolish so that he may become wise. So, let no man deceive himself. How can we deceive ourselves? How can we deceive ourselves? Just look in the verse. It tells us. I got one shaking the hand, says, yeah. I put, yeah, Sandy, excuse me, Stacy.
Well, it's kind of like just taking someone's word for it and believing it without, you know, looking and see what it
Okay.
says.
I had the phrase, which was, thinks that he is wise in his own age or wise beyond his age. You know, I've got a teenager that thinks he knows everything in the world. I mean, you ask him a question, boom, he's got an answer. And it's like, no. So he thinks he's wise in his age, you know, for his age. We told him that if he's that wise, he shouldn't be in high school, he should be on elevator. But wise beyond, you know, people out there are like that. You know, think they know things which, you know, after you start questioning, you're going to find out they really don't know about that particular topic, but they think they're wise for their age. But yet, we are told here they have to become foolish. You know, Jesus didn't come to the high and mighty when he came to earth, did he? He was very humble beginnings, stayed among the humble people. And if the nobles and priests and high priests and all that, you know, took him, that's fine. But if not, you know, he came down because he said that, you know, the gospel and the apostles preach Christ, preach him crucified, preach foolishness, because who in the world would ever thought about a person being crucified to save the world? You know, how foolish would it be that if we're added to God's church that we have to be baptized? You know, so most people, that's foolishness. So we have to be fools in order to be wise. Other comments? While I look at my notes. Okay, I had here Romans 1:21 to back up 1 Corinthians 3. Basically, it says, claiming to be wise, they have to become fools, as we just talked. And then if we go to Romans, I asked the question, why did Paul say in Romans 16, or what did Paul say in Romans 16:19? 16:19, for the report of your obedience has reached all, therefore I am rejoicing over you, but I want you to be wise in what is good and innocent in what is evil. So, Paul wants us to be what? Wise in what? Wise and good, right? What else?
It's not like it says on the heart.
Okay. Innocent in what's evil. I put wise in what's right and wrong, good and evil. Okay. Make that distinction. Don't be deceived. Because in deception, one of those devices that Satan likes to use, yeah, you betcha. You know, if I can deceive one person, just like Eve was deceived, then I got him. I got him. Okay, we'll move on. Any comments? Anybody else got any more deceptions? I got a few more. Speak up. Ephesians 5:6. Ephesians 5:6 is, well, if I can get my fingers working. What does Ephesians 5:6 tell us about deception or being deceived?
Not to be deceived with empty words.
With empty words. What in the world's empty words? What would empty words be?
Vain.
Vain, okay, empty, vain. Man, didn't we go through a study on a book that talked about vain and empty? You know, the book of Ecclesiastes. Back that up. So, devoid of truth, you know, don't be deceived. And we know what empty words are out there. You know, somebody, you know, speaking and they might not know exactly what they're talking about. It could be that smooth and flattering words up in Romans 16. It could be the point that that individual can be deceiving himself. So these verses can come together. They can match up. It's not one verse here, one here, one here. We can pull them together into one person. Gene.
If you hear somebody make a speech, talk, and politicians, and you listen, and if you have to say afterwards, what do you say?
Right. Then that's empty.
You know, that's just, I've not heard this in a long time, but we used to call that skating. In other words, it just, you don't know what he's saying. And that's about it.
Yep. And then the smooth and flattery words along with it.
Yeah.
Yep. Just keep rolling. Dave. Brother
One
Dave.
thought that comes to mind real quick is when somebody is speaking in tongues.
Okay.
That's vain.
That's vain, unless, okay, if somebody's speaking in tongues in church, what has to be in that
An
group?
interpreter.
Yeah, interpreter. So if there's no interpreter, there's no speaking in tongues. But still, if that person's speaking in tongues, you have an interpreter that interprets it, yeah, he could be empty words there. Possibility. All right, empty words. We're going to go over, and it's a whole chapter, and we're not going to read the chapter, but if I say Proverbs chapter 7, there's things that pop up at us. I mean, if you read it. It talks about a particular person. When you get over there, we need to find out what that particular, or who that particular person is. It talks about a way of dress, okay, and how that person, the way the dress, went out and got the naive person, very simple person, and who are we talking about?
Harlot.
The harlot, okay. So we can be deceived by dress, can we not? Okay. The harlot gets fixed up, knowing the intent of what she wants to do, goes out there in the streets, and what time of the day? If I remember right, it's towards night, twilight night, you know, in the darkness, and finds that simple person, don't know, you know, young person that don't know. I can, decades ago, relate to that, you know, and then brings them in and does that. So deception by dress. We can go to 1 Timothy 2, 9 through 10, and if you're familiar with the passages, it talks about the ladies and in modest apparel and respectable, self-control, not to adorn yourself with all the jewels and everything. You know, men, we're not, you know, got away, you know, this passage doesn't get us away from it either. Even though I talk about it later, we need to be respectable apparel, modest, self-control. And there's things out there in the world, men's side, is not respectable. Not respectable. I see it every time I work. You have to put blinders on. You know, shorts up, tight, shirts low, I mean, things exposed that shouldn't be exposed, yeah, straight.
I'm not seeing here how she was trying to be deceiving. She was what she was.
Mm-hmm.
And she was known by that, by the way she dressed.
But still, there's some deception, you know, the young one, simple, may not, may not know the ways of the world yet.
Right.
You know, and things, but yes, that is true. But today, we need, you know, we need to have that respect. Anybody else? I got a few more. All right, let's go to 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 10. The next 3 or 4 verses I grouped in called deceiving verses, or do not be deceiving verses. 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 10. Do you not know the unrighteous will not inherit the earth? Do not be deceived. And then he goes through a list of individuals. Then he comes down in verse 10. You have to go to verse 9 to say, do not be deceived, neither fornicators nor idolaters. And then in verse 10, will inherit the kingdom of heaven. So none of those people will inherit the kingdom of God. So, people's way of life. Aren't they some out there that has a very different way of life, and they at times push their way of life onto others? Have you ever experienced that? You know, it could be right now, what's the hot topic? One of same-sex marriage. We don't call it homosexuality anymore. It's same-sex marriage, partners, things of that nature. And there's folks that do that, and at times they push that, you know, thoughts on to others. Okay? You know, in the list, any of these can be pushed if we couple that with 1 Corinthians 15:33, and basically that is, you know, bad company corrupts good morals. Okay, so if you take the list out of the 1 Corinthians 6, and then bad company corrupts good morals, that tells us that we don't need, I mean, I know we have to work in the world, don't get me wrong, but we don't have to get close in the world. We have to be separate. If a Christian associates with those people in 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 10, then wouldn't you think that would start rubbing off? If you prefer the friend out in the world association more than we prefer each other Christians association. Make sense? An example, you know, you got an event, same night, Christian said, hey, why don't you come to this event with me and we can go, and then your friend in the world said, well, we got another event over here, why don't you come with me? Which one would you choose? If you choose the friend of the world, then you prefer the world, and that's, according to Scripture, not right, correct? We are to prefer one another. EJ?
It's not about laughing, but I'm in the real world, okay?
Yep.
I'm thinking about what you just now said. Going to this event, going to that event, you got a lot of Christians, females, and then you got some that just don't care, that can persuade the Christian female to come and look and see what's happening. Mm-hmm. And if they're strong-minded, they will go and see what's happening so they don't do it. But if they're weak-minded, they're going to go over there, they're going to stay. That's why a lot of people leave the church.
Yep. Yep, those enticing, smooth words, flattery words, to get them to go.
They're going to keep on doing it.
Dave?
Well, we should always put God first.
They don't want
If
to.
not, we're just being covetous.
Yep. And if we say we're a Christian and don't put God first, isn't that hypocrisy as well? I mean, we can go travel down a couple of different roads. Any other thoughts or questions before we move on? No more hands? Okay, Galatians 6, 7 through 10. We're going to paraphrase that one. We find that if we sow to the flesh, we'll reap things of the flesh. If we sow to the Spirit, we'll reap things of the Spirit. Says, don't be deceived. Can somebody sow to the flesh and reap spiritual? I mean, well, they can probably reap spiritual things. It would be the wrong, right? If they sow to the flesh, what their spiritual reaping going to bring? Well, it's going to bring damnation, destruction, hell at Judgment Day. So he's saying if you sow to that spirit or that flesh, you're going to reap it. If you sow to the Spirit, how can we sow to the Spirit? How can we sow to the Spirit? So we can reap spiritual things. How can we sow? Are we doing it right now? Okay, Bible study, or what are we going to do at 10 o'clock? Okay, main worship, we're going to sow by singing, Lord's Supper, remembrance, you know, the lesson for this morning from Dustin, opening up the Word and just looking at it. Can we sow to the Spirit during the week? I hope so. The Bereans did. Every day they was looking at the Scripture. Yes, Gene?
There's a saying that if we forget history, that we repeat.
Yes.
And it's going to be interesting, but I think we all should look at our life and, you know, what's going on and try to learn by it. And in the last 50 years, I mean, things have really gone what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And you look back and you say, why? And of course, there's reasons that you can tell. I mean, I can remember the time that the denominational world, you know, they didn't teach the baptism right, this or that. But I can remember when all the denominations that I knew, man, they were strict on things that we're talking about today. Now, that is, you know, that's what's happened. And what happens there is, as the knowledge of the Bible and as people refuse to accept it, and babies become parents, and they keep turning around, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse. I know it sounds depressing, but that's a fact. And so each one of us has to try to save ourselves, our families, and those that we come in contact with.
Yeah. We go to James 1:13 through 17. Verse 16, do not be deceived, my beloved brethren, but if you go up, we find how, but as one is tempted in verse 14, he is carried away and enticed in his own lust. Then lust conceives, gives birth to sin, and then sin accomplished, it brings forth death. So it's kind of like the birth of sin. So we can be deceived, we can deceive ourselves by looking at it, being tempted by looking at, man, that's good. How can I get it? You know, the lust there, and then it born sin, and then sin brings forth death. Is that a spiritual death or physical death that we're talking about in James 1? Yes, it'd be a spiritual death on that. We're going to end with examples in the Bible that you can think of where folks were either deceiving or being deceptive. We've already mentioned Eve with the serpent or Satan in Genesis 3. Can we think of any others? Yes, Trey. Esau, and give us kind of the background.
He sold his birthright. No, it was Jacob that deceived his father by putting the hair on his hands so that he could
act like he was
get the
Esau.
blessing.
Yeah. Isaac and Jacob, Genesis 27. You know, sold the birthright, that's correct. Jacob with his mom got together, he got the blessing, Esau didn't get the firstborn blessing. And it's kind of strange that in a few chapters from that, Genesis chapter 29, Jacob got deceived by Laman. Okay, he fell in love with Rachel, wanted to marry Rachel. They had the wedding feast, and who did he get? Leah. It's like he was deceived because, you know, the firstborn or secondborn can't go before the firstborn. Well, you know, a little bit of payback. He understood on that side of what he did with his father. Now here he is getting deceived himself. Who else can we think of? One that you probably wouldn't think of would be Tamar and Judah. Okay, Judah's sons were died off, and Tamar was there. Of course, custom was the next brother would get the wife, have children for that brother, and Judah had a younger son that wasn't of age, and then when he grew up, apparently Judah didn't give that younger son to Tamar. So, yes, EJ.
Didn't Satan try to, deceive Jesus, but tell him to do what he wanted to do? And I'm leaving it at
Yep.
that.
We'll get to that, hopefully. But anyway, Tamar dressed it up, went and deceived Judah, got pregnant by Judah. And then the rest of the story, Judah had to find out who it was, and it was him. And then he realized what's happened. Well, I told you we weren't going to get out of verse 3, and we probably didn't get out of the verse, a couple of phrases of that, which hopefully Chuck will be happy. He can go on and glean the rest of the verse and the chapter. I do appreciate participation today more than you realize.